Hello, agentpreneurs, and welcome to episode 71 of the Daily List Report. It's Monday, and you know what that means? That means that I've got my co-founder and CEO, Ajay Shah, on. We're going to talk about a wide-ranging number of topics, a lot of things that are happening in the market right now, how the market's responding, and what we're doing to try to help you navigate some of those changes. You're here on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. It's growing nicely. Share this with your fellow agents. Make sure when you subscribe, you also click the bell to be notified of new episodes. We've got 70 episodes before this, a lot of really great content from some amazing thought leaders, product tutorials, and of course, a lot of conversations with our guest today, Ajay Shah. So without further ado, Ajay, welcome to the show.
What up, agentpreneurs? How are you?
They are doing great, AJ. I'm speaking on their behalf right now, but I think everyone's doing great. AJ, thanks for taking the time to come on. I always enjoy our Monday musings. You know, never know what the topic is, right? Sometimes up until right before we record, but we've got a bunch of cool stuff to cover today. So, AJ, you know, there was a story in Inman today which covered on a wide-ranging number of topics that are all sort of COVID related, right? Byproducts of what's happening with COVID and some of the things that are going to have maybe some lasting changes. So what I wanted to do is I kind of wanted to get you to weigh in on a few of these. So the first one is the market itself has changed in fundamental ways. And we've seen a lot of data. We talked about data on this show weeks ago about a massive increase in search activity for not just residential suburban areas, but also rural areas, right? So we're seeing this migration. AJ, maybe you know the number. I think there was something talk of about 500,000 sort of upper middle class people leaving New York City. So there's this great migration that's happening. So any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, remember a couple of weeks ago, it could have been last week, we said volatility is going to be the predominant thing of the day, right? Like, so every
We
week is
did.
going to be a little bit different. And
Peaks and
so,
valleys.
yeah, exactly. So just sort of trying to determine the trend is the tough part here, right? And so in times of volatility, it's harder for people to invest in their business in a way that yields consistent results. So you
Yes.
have to be very reactive to the moment, certainly. And you have to keep your wits about you because, you know, no one knows where all of this is going. We don't know where all these migrations are going to end up in terms of the long-term trends. A lot of speculators, a lot of people who, you know, are trying to be pretty wise about it. I mean, I think there's a strong argument to be made that people are leaving the cities because of a couple things. Number one, there's a general feeling that cities are where COVID lives, right?
Right.
More than, you know, more spacious areas. Number two, because of work from anywhere and the fact that a lot of people can now work wherever they want, right? So that's going to impact things pretty significantly. And so a lot of people are going to be leaving the cities and they're going to be going to suburbs where they can have bigger neighborhoods and bigger lawns and backyards and parks, and they feel that they're
Workout
generally
rooms, right? Extra bedrooms for offices, whatever.
office. Oh man, that's true. And I don't know if you saw that. Maybe we can find the link for it. There's this company that has actually created a modular office space that you can just put onto your backyard,
That's cool.
like 50 or 75 grand. Really, really cool. It's a self-contained thing. You know, Randy actually has this nice little office unit here that is sort of
Very
this
lucky.
self-contained thing that he works in. But that sort of trend you can imagine happening where people are saying, well, I'm going to work from home at least several times a week. So I want to make sure I have a nice office space that's separate from maybe
Mm-hmm.
the kids and other distractions along the way.
Yeah.
Not the kids distractions or anything.
Well, as a parent of two kids, I can say that oftentimes kids are a distraction. So that's a fair
Okay, I
statement.
wasn't allowed to say that because I don't have kids, but
That's right. That's right. I'm allowed to say that because I have kids.
yeah, there
Um,
you go.
You know, speaking of this uncertainty, right, these peaks and valleys, two things. One is next week, for all of you watching right now, Omri Friedel, who is our head of finance, and he's talked to you about the PPP and, you know, forgiveness and all of that stuff. He's been great. He's actually going to do a show about really hands-on how to manage your cash flow, right? So, Age, when we talk about uncertainty, it's difficult to know when to invest, how to invest, if you can invest. Like, you have to make sure that you protect the cash that you have. But similarly, it looks like, according to the data, that the sellers are increasingly resistant to spend money on their listings, and yet we know that if you spend on things like staging, you're going to sell that house more quickly. So I think, well, we've talked about pad styler, but just talk a little bit about how that uncertainty extends even into certainly the consumers.
Yeah, I mean, the days on market are growing longer, right? So staging, traditional staging, is oftentimes some combination of an upfront fee, and then you have this fee that's paid out based on how long the property is being staged. So, if you have that property on the market for even an extra week, or if it goes an extra month, it's going to cost a lot of money. And so that's a tricky situation, because we do know that staged properties do sell faster than other properties and at a higher price point. So there's this balance. We in our marketplace, I'm sure a lot of people don't even know that we have a marketplace. We're still just getting the word out about it. But
Absolutely.
in our marketplace, we have a virtual staging company that we work with, called Pad Styler. They're the best ones that we've seen on the market. We actually negotiated a deal with them to provide discounts to our agents around that. So that's a thing, I think, that it's a pretty cheap way to provide something similar. And one of the things I note, Randy, is a lot of agents are concerned because they say, well, the virtual stage stuff looks really good, at least the stuff that Pat Seiler does. But I'm afraid that when people come into the house, they're disappointed because they don't see it. And so two things here that I think are interesting. One, make sure that on the property itself, on the picture, you indicate that this is digitally altered to
Yes.
include furnishings or what have you. That'll make sure that people are not surprised when they actually see the house and they see an empty room or maybe junkier furniture that was there, because they actually do furniture replacement, virtual furniture replacement in here. It's not just an empty room that they're staging, right? So that's pretty cool. Second thing is, we heard about this one agent who actually creates a blow up version of the virtual staged photos.
Yes.
And they put it on an easel, right? And actually, so that when you're looking at the room itself, you can see what it would look like with that virtual furniture. So that might be something. So if you are concerned about cost of traditional staging, and no doubt it's expensive, it's not for every market either. The price on like virtual staging is maybe 100, $200 at most for
For, yeah, multiple
a bunch of
rooms at that. Yeah.
bunch of rooms. That's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's a thought. I understand where people are coming from in terms of they want to hold on to their cash right now, and it's an uncertain time. So that feeling makes sense. Resist the urge.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Hey, just since you brought it up, I did pull it up on screen here. So, um, for those of you watching, we'll link to this as well. Last Wednesday's episode, that would be episode 68, with Mike Simon, our head of business development. We talked about this new member benefits section. This is what AJ is talking about. And so within that, you've got a number of deals that you can explore, but Pad Styler is the one that he was talking about, right? So if your sellers are more resistant to the expenses that come with marketing, with, let's say, staging, either because they don't want to incur the expense, or frankly because they just don't want people in and out of their house moving furniture. If you look at this section here, and you can see some examples of virtual staging, what AJ is talking about, which is a really interesting idea, is that you actually take one of these photos, you blow it up, you put it on an easel in the room, and so when somebody's actually seeing the home, they could again further imagine what it's going to look like. So I think that's pretty great, and a really good alternative, actually, especially given the cost and the fact that you don't have to have people in your house moving in and out of furniture.
And full disclosure on that, but by the way, this is important. ListReports does make money on each of those transactions. So
Yes, we do.
this is the way that we fund the business, but we don't just include anybody in that list. We only include companies that we've personally vetted. And by we, I mean I personally talked to most of the founders of these companies, or the senior management myself. So we only want to put things out there that are quality.
Absolutely the case, and at the same time also making sure that we bring all of you the best deal on the market. In fact, with Pad Styler, you're not going to find a better deal than this. So
Yeah,
that's definitely a
that we
win-win.
found anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
The next few things that Inman talks about are really around essentially keeping people out of your house, right? Right. So this idea that if somebody comes into your house, you should do a deep cleaning, right? gone probably are the days of the free-for-all open house where random people just walk in and out of the house, right? And so that's an interesting thing as you think about how people can effectively, market their properties and sell their properties, and the tools that need to exist to allow people to sort of whittle down their list a little bit further. How do you think about that in the context of what's happening in the market and also in terms of what we're doing?
Yeah, this is a really tricky one because of the fact that, I mean, me personally, when I'm looking for a home, I definitely like to be there in person and walk around. And one of the big differences is that photos oftentimes don't do a good job of capturing the size of a space. And so, I was just checking out a home a few weeks ago where I went through the whole COVID. I had to fill something out and say I didn't have COVID, and I would take all these precautions. Did it, went inside the house, and the ceilings were really low. So, the house actually did feel smaller. Having said that, I think we saw a statistic that about 1 in 4 homes now are being bought sight unseen, in terms of someone not actually physically going to the property to inspect it before they pull the trigger and actually buy that.
It's
Didn't we
it's
discuss that
there
before?
was it's not that high nationally. There
Mhm.
was a survey where I think about 1 in 6 agents had sold a property to somebody who hadn't seen the
Yeah.
product, the
Thank you.
property. But yeah,
Yeah.
not 1 in 4 of all properties.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So sorry about that.
No worries.
Fake news here.
There's a lot of data.
Yeah. But in any event, uh, yes. So people are doing this, but my feeling is it still makes sense at the end of the day to somehow equip that house and be ready to have someone take a showing in person of that house.
Yes,
Um, we're modifying and tweaking a lot of our strategies because our claim to fame was this open house flyer,
I
right?
know,
So
right?
that's
Isn't
the
that weird
first
now?
thing that, it's the first thing we did. So I think now, like, we use sign writers, and we have text codes on there so that people can kind of see inside the property. We have a virtual open house solution, but we haven't opened that up to everybody yet. I think within the next 30 to 60 days, we're going to open
Yes,
that up to everybody who is paired with a loan officer, right? Where they can actually use our virtual open house solution, which I think is the best one out there.
I
Uh,
agree.
Look, we have some credibility here because we have the best open house solution, according to a lot of people, and we built our business that way. So I think, you know, we're fairly credible when we say we have the best solution in terms of virtual open
Yes.
house experience. So anyway, I think you're going to have to do things like that. The Matterport tours. We had Nick on a week or two ago talking about how you could do your own Matterport tour. So things like that, where I think you're going to have to get people in that house. By the way, there is one really big upside to all of this. This is a brand new way to do lead generation, right? So the fact that you can create content for your own properties is a fantastic thing because it means that you can put that content out there. You can gate it with a registration wall. You can engage people in ways that you wouldn't otherwise be able to engage them. So look at this as a new opportunity to actually do easier forms of lead generation than an open house. An open house required a lot of energy and guts of a real estate agent, and they'll probably come back in some form. But I think there's cooler, newer ways to do it using online.
Yes. I think that's true, AJ. I think, look, at the end of the day, right, as an agent, you're going to have to meet the needs of your seller or your buyer, right? And you're going to have some sellers who are more comfortable letting people come in and out of their home with some level of cleaning and protection. You're going to have others who simply aren't. And as AJ mentioned, right, 2 Fridays ago, Nick and we talked about how to do a Matterport on your phone. That was episode 55. We'll link to that as well. And so, it may be the case that you just have to do your own Matterport, right? And that's okay, right? So understanding what tools and technologies are available to you so that you can meet the needs of your client, like that is your job at the end of the day. And there's so many things that you have access to. And I think, that level of flexibility is really empowering at a time like this, frankly. AJ, speaking of camera work, right? We do it on this show. We've talked about this quite a bit.
Yeah.
Inman talked about this idea that you can't afford to be camera shy anymore, right? And I love this. They said there are three great truths about on-camera work. Everyone thinks they look hideous on camera. That is true. Nobody else cares how you look on camera. That's also true. And everyone's first few videos are awful. And that is also true. If you look at any YouTuber with any level of success, inevitably they have a video where they're like, and check out my first video. And it was like shaky and blurry. And you couldn't even hear me talk half the time on our first videos. Remember that, Age? Extremely frustrating. You're like, as a matter of fact, I do.
I do.
And so, we did a show about this last Friday, right? When we're talking about, let's say you wanted to start a YouTube channel and, the steps that you need to take to actually do that. But I love this, right? Everyone thinks they look terrible. Nobody cares how you look, right? Your first few videos are going to be terrible. But the point here is that, as we think, AJ, about a virtual open house or ListReports Live or what these tools are, is you're going to have to find different mediums and new ways to communicate and to establish your credibility and your knowledge as an agent with your buyers. So I said a lot there, AJ. I don't know if you have any thoughts you want to add to that.
Well, one thing, and I've been thinking a lot about this for myself as well, and looking at tips online, figuring out how to bring your personality out through this medium is really tricky.
Yes.
So, by the way, I think you've done an exceptional job of sort of doing that yourself.
Thank you.
Randy is, by the way, somebody of many talents, and so he never makes anything look too difficult. But the fact of the matter is that it's not as easy for the rest of us. But nonetheless, just sort of bringing your personality out is hard to do over video, because I don't know what the percentage is, but just doing it over video diminishes some of your personality. It doesn't carry as well. So you got to kind of work extra hard at pulling that out of you. And that means, probably anchoring yourself ahead of time, making sure that you take some deep breaths and relax, and then, do your best to get your personality out there on camera. That's, when there's so much video out there now, how are you going to differentiate yourself? How are you going to keep someone's attention? You're going to have to do it by, bringing your personality to the table.
It's true. It's just to that point, it makes me think of that, that old adage, right? That the camera adds 10 pounds, right? Like the camera probably also, like, I don't know, removes 10 pounds from your personality. So to your point, you're right. You have to go a little bit above and beyond where you think. And the other point that I've made multiple times is you actually get used to staring at the back of a camera and talking, right? You do get used to that. It is the weirdest thing ever, but you get used to it and it becomes invisible at some point.
Mm-hmm. Great. That's great advice. By the way, I love this article. Was this all one article?
Yes, it is. And we'll post a link to it as well. It is paywalled though, right? So many of you probably know, many of you are subscribers, but some of you who aren't, it is a paywalled article. But we'll see if we can get access to this.
Cool. What else do they have on there? Any other goodies?
Well, let's see. So this one is number 8. If all else fails, let buyers see the property in person. Mm-hmm. And what this is talking about is really helping your buyers kind of winnow down their list before they go. So if they're going to go see it, it's not like it used to be, which is, hey, what the heck? I've got nothing to do. Show me 8 homes, right? It's, okay, I really think that these 2 or 3 homes are something that are important. And there's, AJ, you talked about this, right? There's disclosures now that you have to sign. There's certain PPE that you have to wear when you go through this. And there are other things to consider, which is, this is an example, who is doing post-visit cleanings and who's paying for that service, right? So as a seller's agent, you have to consider these things. If you're going to bring people into the home, does the home need to be cleaned afterwards? And if so, who ends up bearing that cost? So there's a lot to work out in that.
It is. It's really, really tricky. I mean, by the way, I think the agents that we've spoken to really adapted well to all of this.
Well.
Extraordinary amount of, this comes from just being an entrepreneur, I think, right?
Yes.
This idea that, hey, whatever the problem is, we will overcome that problem and surmount that wall, right? And generally speaking, I think that the fierceness that I've seen agents do this and the ability for them to adapt is really inspiring. Having said that, I think there is a point where a lot of people are going to get to the point where they have to see the house. This an incident like what we're going through with coronavirus and COVID is one of the examples of where I think agents really prove their value, right?
Yes,
now,
I
someone
agree.
trying to do this all on their own, for sale by owner or whatever, Like this is an opportunity for the whole industry to say, look, you complain about our commissions and everything else, but look what we can do and look at the value that we add through this process. And so, I don't have anything specific to say about that. I think people are going to have to come and
Yeah.
see us, and you're probably just going to have to incur the cost or what have you. But I think this is just the opportunity to step up and innovate and do all the things that this industry is great at doing. And it's
I
proving
think you're right,
remarkable.
AJ.
Yeah.
It's a very good point. I feel like we've touched on this, in various episodes from time to time, right? Like, be in front of your sphere and educating them on what's happening. But you're right, just sort of at a more fundamental level, right? If you look at all of the things that have eroded at least the perceived, right? And in some cases, maybe chipped away at the actual value of an agent. It's times like this where you're like, how could you possibly do this on your own, right? So it is an amazing opportunity for agents to be in front of your sphere and educating them on what this process is like, rolling with the ups and downs and the new disclosures, this and all of that, because it's a complicated process. And this is something that hopefully will re-anchor all of your position in the role of buying a home or selling a home, because clearly it's critical.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Age, the last item on here, they call it, does the cost benefit ratio work? And the point is this, and we've touched on a couple of these just now. In a sense, maybe there's more cost when you take on a listing now. So there's always cost, right? There's always a level of risk when you take on a listing that you're going to invest in staging and marketing, all these things. And look, most homes sell, right? So that risk, I think, is not tremendous. But there's a lot of expenses that get fronted. But now if you look about cleaning costs and all of the things that you have to do, the new disclosures and the time that you have to spend on a transaction, it's more risky. So, Inman article is saying no one likes to say no to business, but the wrong yes can be extremely costly these days. And then they ended with just sort of, this is an opportunity, as you've talked about, and I think I've talked about, which is an opportunity to up your skills to do things in different ways. So I think they're arguing here to just be thoughtful about the business that you take on. The reality, as we know, AJ, is that there's extremely limited inventory across the board. Prices are now increasing at sort of pre-COVID rates. Like, it's crazy because there's no inventory, right? And there are still buyers in the market.
Yeah. Well, first off, I thought this was the most provocative point they made in the article, right? Like this idea that, hey, maybe you shouldn't take that next listing.
Right.
And it would have never occurred to me actually, is
Right.
that, this is going to be more work and more money than it's worth. So, I don't know how to feel about that.
I don't either.
And it's a valid point, on the face of it, is that, is this going to be a nightmare for you? But
Yeah.
but outside of that, I think with respect to this, still speaks to all of the other things we talked about in terms of, in order to make decisions where you're taking on properties like this and really fronting those costs. Which, by the way, I don't want this to be like we're sort of selling all our partners here, but if you're not aware of e-commissions, that's a partner
Yeah.
we have where they'll advance you cash under certain terms and things like that. I think that's a really interesting one right now in particular, because you may need that cash up front for marketing and things like that that you may not have. So I think that's on the member benefits section too.
It is, and not only that, but episode 9 of the show, which we'll also link to, was with Sean Whaling, who's the CEO of E-Commission, and we talked all about it, right? It's a really great product, and they are an unbelievably ethical and amazing company.
Yeah. But I mean, I think that the larger point Inman's making here about this idea that, hey, maybe, listing is too risky to take on and incur the cost of that. That's something that I had never even considered, to be honest with you. But yeah, desperate times, right? So
Absolutely.
so yeah, it's worthy of consideration.
It is. Here, Age, just, we don't have to go into detail on these, but the weekly housing trends key findings came out today, and this is from Realtor.com. Sorry, this is from Friday. Total inventory was down 30%. Year over year, right? And so again, speaks to the fact there's not a lot of inventory. New listings are actually also down 17% year over year. That makes sense. The market is coming back. Listings are slow to recover here. But median listing prices are now growing at 6.2% over last year, faster than pre-COVID pace. And again, this is tied to the low inventory. And then the last one here.
There might
Oh,
be. I'm sorry.
no, go
Finish
ahead.
that. Then.
No, it's
Yeah,
okay.
I was just going to say, there's something else going on where, if you're seeing buyers come from the cities, where they were already paying in many cases overinflated prices for their
Yeah.
homes, then in some cases the suburbs look cheap, right?
Yeah. It's a good point.
So
It's
you
a
have
really good
all this
point.
money where they're liquidating maybe some of that cash and coming into relatively cheaper areas. Even some of these suburbs, like where we live, is pretty expensive,
Yeah.
but maybe cheaper than some of the cities like Los Angeles nearby. And so as people are
Yeah.
moving, it's actually like, hey, this is a deal, and so you're competing with a larger pool of people now who, may find these bargain basement prices, relatively
It's very
speaking.
true, and it may increase the number of cash buyers, right? Depending on how much equity you have in the home. So there's a lot of interesting things that are going to unfold here. The last data point I was going to mention is that time on market is now just 7 days slower than last year, right? So it's,
Yeah.
again, to your point of agents adapting, right? They're used to the new disclosures. They figured out a way to make this happen. So we're only about 7 days slower than last year in terms of closings, which is not too bad. And it looks like that's continuing to narrow. And so we'd expect it to come back to sort of the normal range here pretty soon. Awesome.
That's
That was
super
pretty
impressive.
cool. Yeah, it is. It really is impressive, and it speaks to the resiliency of the agents out there and adaptability, which is pretty fantastic, and why we're here, right? We're here to serve you. So, Age, any parting thoughts today? That was a pretty cool, interesting rundown on this article from Inman today, which was really interesting.
Okay, so here's the point that I made at our executive meeting this morning that I just wanted to reiterate to all of our agentpreneurs as well. You joined this industry because there was something that you loved about it, right? So find the joy in every moment of what you do, even when you're in frustrating moments. Joy is something that you can choose to do.
Yes.
Winners enjoy what they do, losers do not, right? So make sure that you carry the joy of what you're doing. Find that in every moment or as many as you can. It is a choice. So do that joyfully as we start the second half of this year. I know the first half was one that we're never going to forget,
Yes.
but it's really up to us to make that choice. And if you do your work with joy, you're going to do it better, and everybody's going to notice it. So there's just a little thing that we've been thinking about here at ListReports, and I hope you carry that with you in your own job.
I love it. I love it. H, thanks for sharing that. That's really great advice. Thank you again for being on today. I think we'll wrap. I think we'll wrap together today. So, H, why don't you
Awesome.
say goodbye to the agentpreneurs of List Reports for today?
Agentpreneurs, always my pleasure to be on here. Thank you so much for your attention, and we'll see you soon.
See you tomorrow. Bye.